It started as a small-town rumor, the kind of tale kids whispered about during recess to scare each other. The story went that deep in the woods behind the old lumber mill lived a man, or what was left of him, who survived by drinking glue. Not just any glue, though. The glue Guzzler craved industrial adhesive, the kind used for construction, or so the legend went. They said he'd been doing it for years, that the chemicals had warped his mind and body into something monstrous. No one knew where the story came from, but it kept kids from wandering too far into the woods. Jackson, Toby, and Sam heard the story from their older brothers. Being 15 and full of bravado, they decided one Friday night to put the legend to the test. They packed their flashlights and a couple of sandwiches and set out into the woods. The old mill had been shut down for over a decade, its looming, rusting machinery casting eerie shadows in the moonlight. When they got there, Jackson laughed nervously. "See, no monsters," he said, shining his light around the overgrown yard. But the place had a bad feeling about it. The air smelled like damp wood and something else, something sweet and chemical. "Glue," Toby whispered, wrinkling his nose. "You smell that?" Sam elbowed him. "It's probably old crap left behind when they shut this place down." They ventured closer to the mill where the smell intensified. Piles of broken machinery and scattered tools lay forgotten. Jackson's flashlight flickered, the beam landing on a massive drum of old industrial glue, half rusted through. "See," Jackson said, "nothing to be scared of. Just a creepy old story." He walked over to the drum and knocked on it, smirking as it rang out with a dull thud. But the smile faded from his face when he looked down. On the ground, just beside the drum, were thick, syrupy puddles of glue. But they weren't old, they were fresh. Thick trails led away from the drum, disappearing into the darkness of the mill. "Guys," Sam whispered, his voice trembling, "someone's been here." The three of them stood frozen for a moment. The glue trails seemed to pulse, as though freshly laid, and the sickly sweet smell was overwhelming now. Then they heard it, a faint, wet sound like something thick being slurped through a straw. Jackson pointed his flashlight into the building's doorway. In the weak beam, they could see something moving, shuffling slowly but deliberately. The sound grew louder, more frantic. A figure crouched in the corner, its back to them. It was thin, too thin, with skin stretched tight over bones that jutted out at odd angles. Its face was buried deep inside a glue drum, slurping. Suddenly it stopped. The room went silent. The figure turned its head slowly, and Jackson's flashlight caught its face. The man, or what had once been a man, had skin that looked like it was melting, sagging from his skull, glistening with glue. His lips were blistered and cracked, glued together in places, but parted just enough to reveal rotten teeth. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and milky, like they hadn't seen light in years. The worst part was his hands, sticky, misshapen claws that seemed to pulse as if trying to peel themselves apart. "Glue," it rasped. "More glue." Jackson, Toby, and Sam turned to run, but the glue Guzzler moved fast, faster than they'd expected. It grabbed Jackson's arm, its sticky fingers pulling him in. The glue on its hands burned, binding them together as Jackson screamed. Toby and Sam were too terrified to move, watching in horror as the creature dragged Jackson closer, its mouth widening in a grotesque grin. The glue Guzzler licked its lips, dripping glue from its chin. "I need more." With a sickening crunch, it yanked Jackson's arm, pulling him into the darkness. His screams echoed through the mill as Toby and Sam bolted, sprinting through the woods without looking back. They never found Jackson's body. The townspeople searched for weeks but turned up nothing. After that night, no one dared to go near the old mill again. But on quiet evenings, when the wind was just right, some people said you could still smell it, the sharp chemical scent of glue. And if you listened closely, You could hear the faint sound of slurping in the distance.